You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast, episode 40.
Your human idea of how things can go is so paltry compared to what the universe is prepared to give you that it really behooves all of us to just throw our ideas away and just watch what your life wants of you.
You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast.
Life purpose, spirituality, higher calling, personal growth, meaningful life.
We ask the deep questions about living a balanced life of meaning, purpose, and joy.
Passion, know thyself, be mindful, spiritual practice, aha moments, life lessons, balance.
It is time to welcome your host, Angie Swartz.
Dr. Michael Lennox is a spiritual teacher, a psychologist, an astrologer, and an expert in dreams and dream interpretation. You've likely seen him or heard him on TV or radio, and he travels frequently to lecture and lead workshops. I am more than thrilled to welcome him to the show today. How are you, Michael Lennox?
I am wonderful and also glad to be here.
Me too. I can't think of a better way to start off a Monday morning.
Yay.
So let's talk a little bit about all this wonderful work that you do.
Okay, it's multivaried. It's interesting. The psychologist piece was the last one to come, not the first one. And dreams came first as a teenager. Then in my sort of, I guess, probably late 20s, I stumbled into astrology. And then in my mid-30s, after sort of selling my soul to the corporate entertainment industry, I decided that I needed to change everything and went to grad school to get my master's and then doctorate in psychology, not really knowing what I was going to do with all of that, but just knew I needed to make a change and dive in.
And what were you doing in the corporate world?
Well, my last job was I was vice president of new business for Playboy. So if this were a dinner party, I'd have a catchphrase for what I did there that would be sort of rude and inappropriate to use here. But the world of Playboy, I was involved in helping expand business opportunities for the Playboy brand. And so it was dealing with, naked women and lots of parties and sort of celebration of that lifestyle, and it, slowly ate my soul a little bit. And no more, by the way, than the little bit of time I spent at a game publisher, Interplay, which is a publisher of one of the first big 3D game manufacturers, where again, just the idea of focusing on bringing into the world more of something that was dumbing people down was just not the place for me. And although I was very pleased that Playboy, while I was still there, paid for half my tuition.
Right.
Yay.
Thank you, Playboy.
Thank you, Playboy.
So why do you think you were in those places? Why was that a part of your life then?
That's a great question, considering our conversation. And if we're going to have a conversation about consciousness and a notion that every moment of our lives is of value and plays into or authentic integrated selves that we're all becoming, I would say, especially Playboy, because it did deal with sexuality and kind of a celebration of things that or many people bring shame consciousness to. I think it was an opportunity to explore sides of our humanity that are important for me to have a navigation ability, to understand sexuality as a specific example, or the desire to focus a lot of one's life and attention on that element of life. It wasn't for me as a lifestyle, but it was certainly as a teacher wonderful to spend a couple of years doing a kind of research about, well, what is it about escapism that is so evocative for people, and to sort of be hand in hand in that, not to stay there, but to visit and get what I can and learn out of it. even the 5 or 6 years that I spent in the movie industry at MGM and Warner Brothers, where I was in the home video department selling movies, gave me, a deeper appreciation for the power of media and film as an archetypal experience, that we have come to a place in our evolution as a human consciousness where what used to be stories around the campfire and gods and goddesses that inhabited the heavens, we're really doing the same thing with our movies. Only now our goddesses are actresses and our gods are warriors, are athletes and the like, and we create mythologies around them that come to us through our media. I learned a lot about both those worlds by selling movies and selling naked women.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that you're anti-movies, anti-sex,
no,
anti all of those things now?
No, I would say the opposite is true. In fact, in my own personal experience, first of all, I love movies. I love movies as an escapism. That's a wonderful way to sort of balance out attending to things in a very conscious way. I think all of us need rest and relaxation from that, and one of the forms that I do that with is movie watching. But I will say that when I am watching a movie, part of me is watching what I'm watching and saying, oh, well, how interesting is this? How does this story about, a hero's journey apply to what my life experience is right now? Or why might I be watching this serial killer movie? What needs to be looked at in the darker recesses of my experience? I keep this mostly to myself, because then otherwise I would just be some solipsistic, narcissistic person who can't stop thinking about themselves to other people. But personally, I think of every moment as an opportunity to be conscious about what I'm doing and who I'm being, including how I choose to relax and escape.
How exciting. How exciting for the rest of us to strive to get there. What do you think of our culture's current obsession with 50 Shades of Grey and that BDSM world?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it is, I'm hoping, what I'd like to say it might be is a move toward integrating what is ultimately currently a sort of off-projection of shadow material, that we're so afraid of our sexuality as a culture that it becomes something that we disown. And we say, oh, that doesn't exist, or that is a terrible thing, and therefore I don't look at it. And like anything that gets stuck in the shadow, if we're pretending that we aren't something, then that thing that we're pretending we aren't will run us. And the process of becoming more conscious of those things that are in the shadow includes taking them out and glancing at them and being in a relationship with that disowned thing, in this case, a kind of darkness to our sexuality. The process of integrating that and owning it is to look at it. And remember, owning something doesn't mean you've got to practice it. It doesn't mean that, okay, now that you've seen 50 Shades of Grey, you better go out and get your dungeon,
You don't need a bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. It's to say I don't have to pretend that this isn't a part of my being as a human being, that my being includes an interest or curiosity about my sexuality, whatever that sexual expression is. And I think that the fascination with it culturally is a reflection that we're opening up to look at things that we've previously glossed over or pretended didn't exist. And so it showed up in a wild fascination with that movie.
Mm-hmm. Do you think everybody has that curiosity on some level?
Let me answer this very carefully, because the answer would be yes and no. The yes is that all of us as individual human expressions of consciousness carry within us everything. That everything that can be conceived of lives inside each one of us. And so the best example to make the point I'm making is like murderous rage. Murderous rage is a human experience. It exists in every human being. Now, does that mean that all of us are going to act on it? No, most of us have our murderous rage in check. And so we can move through life safe from the impulses to act on such darker, dangerous, and destructive qualities. But so the answer to the question about, say, something that's darkly sexual. As a human being, everybody has access to it, but we're also each individual personalities oriented around ourselves in a constellation of who we are that is, I don't know what it comes from. Maybe some of it's our genetic makeup, some of it's our modeling and the way we were raised, and some of it is certainly just a mystery that, some people like vanilla ice cream and some people like chocolate ice cream, and neither one is wrong. It's just, a preference. But the capacity to appreciate ice cream exists in all of us.
Thank you. What a rich explanation. I could talk to you about that forever. But I feel like we should go back to your corporate world and talk a little bit about how you got out of that. So what did you do next? Like, how did you step out of that? And did you make some decisions? I'm done. I'm quitting. I'm fed up.
Yeah, let's see. I would have to start with way before that the sort of stimulation of my spiritual curiosity, which came as a teenager. So let's just establish that no matter where my life landed in terms of making a living and getting jobs that turned into what looked like a career, I was always intensely spiritually curious from a very young age. And so that even though I was devoting a great deal of my time in my life to these jobs that were looking like a career in the business side of the entertainment industry, I was never not seeking to expand my spiritual curiosity in the form of workshops and retreats and books that I would read and practices that I would engage in, and expanding my own intuitive abilities through, first with dream interpretation as a teenager, and then, I got my first deck of tarot cards when I was 17 years old. And so there was always that element of my nature that was very active, but it was something that was a part of my personal life. And then the career in the entertainment industry really just happened because I had always wanted to be an actor. I didn't find that I had a thick enough skin to navigate the business of being a professional actor, so I stopped that, and I just needed a job. And I was smart and talented, so that jobs that I got led to promotions. And so there was this sort of inexplicable moment in my, now in my 30s, where nothing was coalescing enough to satisfy me. The spiritual curiosity pieces were active and vibrant, but I wasn't, at all able to make a living out of it. So while I was working at MGM, as an example, I decided to do my first workshop as a dream interpretation guy. Why? I knew how to interpret dreams. I felt like I could teach a little bit of that to other people, and I lived in Los Angeles, the sort of land where you could hang a shingle and declare yourself anything. And so I made a flyer. I got a yoga studio to give me their space, and I did my first, workshop. I think at age, I was 28, 29 years old. And so it was already there in the back of my mind that a person could do this kind of thing as a life. That is, the spiritual teacher. But it wasn't, it was such a quiet, hidden impulse that I can't even say that at the time I had any thoughts or consciousness about devoting my life to that. It just was something that existed as one thread in the tapestry that I was weaving. What happened in my mid-30s was actually, I think it was a breakup of a relationship. Sort of sparked me into grad school. I don't even know that I can codify exactly what I mean by that, other than, what happens when some dramatic thing occurs. You break up from a relationship, or you lose somebody to a death, where you just have I had a moment of looking around my life, and it was a quiet but powerful impulse that a change needed to happen, but I hadn't any idea what that change ought to be. So it wasn't anything like, I've got to leave this career, or I've got to quit my job. It was, let's just go to school because I can. I knew I didn't want to be a psychotherapist, but I also knew that I didn't have to become a psychotherapist to have my life change as a result of educating myself. And I knew that I knew a lot about certain elements of humanity and spirituality, but I certainly knew that there was a vast amount of information that I wanted to immerse myself in. I wanted to learn about being a human being. And so getting a master's and a doctorate in psychology just seemed like a good idea. And it was such a long, I knew when I started it was going to be such a long process. You know, that I was starting something that was going to take me 5, 6, 7 years. So I certainly didn't need to know what it was going to lead to in order to take that first step. So it was a very blind moment. And
were you distracting yourself from the pain of your breakup? It was a way to move forward?
The breakup was not that painful. It was just a sort of an eye-opening moment, like, well, what am I doing? It wasn't a painful moment. It was just an awareness that the life that I had built just didn't seem to fit me anymore. That the trajectory, like I could see where this moment was going to lead if I stayed on this path. And what it was going to lead to was, you know, different jobs, more money, a different job, more money. That this is what I saw colleagues of mine doing. That I had that trajectory, that eventually I would, 4 years here, 5 years at that career, then switch over to that studio. This is what my compatriots were doing. And I just looked around at the landscape of my life and I said, this is a dull, achy future. That it was all very sort of, glossy. And just the calling, which now that it's, 15, 16, 17 years later, I know exactly what it was. It was my soul screaming out to me to be unleashed and let out of its box. At the time, though, it was just a quiet impulse that was, well, it wasn't really that quiet. It was a small impulse that was wildly, screeching at me from a very tiny corner of my thought process. Just said, make a change. So I followed it.
And when you and I were talking in the green room, so to speak, you were telling me that you made a decision that you were not going to be something, right?
Yes. I had just finished my master's degree, right? So now I had this sort of credential behind me.
As a psychotherapist.
As a psychotherapist. Not a licensed psychotherapist, but I had the master's. So I could say I have a master's in psychology. And so I had been laid off from Playboy because the company was downsizing in a big way, and I had gotten a job in the mental health field, and I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm in this new sort of a place of I can create something. And I knew that one of the things I loved to do more than anything else was speak. I loved talking. I was a good motivational speaker and presenter. I knew that from my corporate world. I had been an actor and a trained actor, so I had the stage presence of a good speaker. And I also knew that I had worked at big brands in the corporate world. I had Business Week magazine on my resume, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, and Playboy. So I could parlay. At that time, in the 90s, corporations were still paying big money for motivational speakers to show up at their various sales events. And I thought, okay, I'm going to speak. I knew that in my heart I wanted to speak about spiritual stuff because that was what jazzed me. But I also knew that you didn't just declare yourself a spiritual teacher. I had no real wisdom at the time. I just knew that I had curiosity, a little bit of knowledge, and I could capture an audience with my ability to articulate. But I had always been so steeped in dreams and dream interpretation. I took a guy out to, actually he took me out to lunch, but he was a pretty big, highly placed person in the entertainment industry, and I wanted his recommendation on a piece of letterhead for my portfolio. So we went to lunch and I was telling him my plans, and I said, telling him I wanted to do motivational speaking, but I didn't want to be the dream guy. And now I don't even know why I said that, Angie. I think that I was so engaged in an idea that just didn't exist yet for me, that I wanted to speak about so many aspects of spiritual consciousness that I thought if I just embraced dreams and dream interpretation that would be limiting. And so I made this declaration: I don't want to be the dream guy, because I thought that would limit what was possible for me. what I later learned was the world really wanted me to be the dream guy, and that it was not at all limiting. That idea, that something like that could be limiting was my human idea of how life could be magnificent. And one of the things that I think anybody on a spiritual path will tell you is that your human idea of how things can go is so paltry compared to what the universe is prepared to give you, that it really behooves all of us to just throw our ideas away and just watch what your life wants of you. What was interesting about that moment was within a month or so, because here I was thinking, I'm going to speak to corporations about, I don't know, communication or human interactions in the workplace, like some bullshit.
Blah, blah, blah.
Right. It didn't interest me at all, right? So that I could get to the place where maybe one day I'd write some book and that would, empower me to speak about spiritual principles. Meanwhile, a month later the phone rings and it's the Sci-Fi Network and they're looking for dream experts. Did I want to come in and audition for a television show? The long story short of that is I did, and amongst 20 experts in dreams and dream interpretation, I got that job, and I spent 2 years developing a show with the Sci-Fi Network, which was green-lit, and we went on to make 65 shows at an enormous budget compared to what they're making TV shows for now. And in 2003, it looked like, big hit. I was going to be this celebrity, dream guy on TV. The show was... Thankfully, of course, then I didn't say thankfully. Then it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. The show was canceled. And that's what put me into the dark night of the soul that really created the man I am today. That is not just the dream guy, but is absolutely the dream guy and the astrology guy and the spiritual teacher guy who's capable of helping people have a more vibrant experience of their own unconscious mind so that they can live a more integrated and powerful life.
Delicious. So for folks that are listening, can you just talk a little bit about the dark night of the soul and what that meant for you?
Okay, sure. So let me start by saying I had big plans and included my BMW Z3 Roadster and being recognized in public for being on television and and all of the trappings that came with being in the club of being recognized and famous, and because that was what the plan was. And I spent all of the money that I had in savings or stock options and the security that I built around me to survive through the 2-year development process, that I desperately needed that show to be a success in order to continue living the lifestyle that I had been living, so that when it was canceled and there was no second season, I was in trouble both emotionally for the expectations I had put on what this was going to lead to my identity, as well as financially, that I suddenly was going to have to sell everything that I owned, turn in my car, move out of my home, find places to live that were much less, lovely. And so very quickly my life went from feeling very big to very, very small. And the crisis of identity and the depression that came up out of that was utter and total. Now, I never stopped working with people in terms of making a living. This is now, I'm only making a living as a therapist or an astrologer or a dream interpretation expert. So I'm working with people, but the practice is so minuscule that I'm barely feeding myself. After, paying for rent, and I'm riding my bike through Los Angeles because I don't have a car. And I had just enough energy to sort of meet those tiny little obligations that I had. But other than that, the level of depression was so complete that I was so depressed I couldn't leave the house. And then when I could finally sort of get myself out of the house, because I maybe needed to go to the grocery store and buy something to eat, I was too depressed to go home, because home was so small and constricting. But in that experience, while I was having that experience, the only thing I knew to do was to throw myself into my spiritual practice. So all I really did all day long was meditate and pray and weep. And in that experience, I began to have very prominent, spiritually phenomenal experiences. And I had energetic expansions. I had great proof that we are much bigger than this consciousness, that we are much greater than these bodies. For lack of a better word, most people would sort of get the gist of what I'm saying when I say out-of-body experiences. I had in a very short period of time, so encapsulated within about a year's time, I just had dozens of out-of-body experiences. And the way I was taken care of by the universe during this time was amazing to me. And I mean, when I say taken care of, I mean that my needs got met. Like, I'd be out of money and somebody would walk up my driveway and say, "Oh, Michael, I want you to read my friend, Bill." And I would give Bill this reading and he would reach into his pocket and hand me $200 cash. My ex-manager took me out to breakfast one morning and I just sort of told her what was up and what was happening for me meditatively, and I didn't say anything about how difficult things were or anything, but she grabbed her purse and she started fishing through her purse, and I was curious about what she was doing. She started throwing all the money that she could find in her purse on the table. Not just what was in her wallet, but like bills that were dug out and had fallen out, and she just gave it like $50, $60. She said, "I just feel moved. I feel like I'm supposed to give you money."
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
Well, and I had these experiences where one day I was standing on Sunset Boulevard next to the All-American Burger. I had $5 to my name that day, and that was enough to buy a full meal that included a cup of coffee, 3 eggs, and some toast, and a cup of coffee. And I was filled with gratitude. Like, filled with, like, this $5 bill in my pocket was, like, screeching out, like, "Oh, my God, I'm rich." It was an amazing feeling. And it transformed my relationship to abundance. Now, abundance wasn't about some idea in my mind about it should look this way or it should be silver and have a top that comes down and drive very fast. That abundance was that I lived in a world that had my back so thoroughly that every need got met by simply opening my heart to what that need might be. And now, I don't want to live like that any longer. I choose to live in a world where, there's more comfort and stability. But I created that world where there's more comfort and stability from that very bare bones place of, I am grateful for this $5 in my pocket. And I had an experience around that All-American Burger one day, too, with a I don't think he was homeless. I think he probably lived in a board and care nearby. So probably a gentleman with some mental illness. But he was very sweet, and we used to have interactions. And if I had a little extra, I gave him money from my pocket. And one day, I didn't see him there, but I was having an interaction where I didn't have enough money in my pocket that day to buy the cup of coffee. All I could afford was the 3 eggs and toast. And this homeless man came over and gave me $1, and I had coffee that day because of the generosity of this man. And that was another sort of, again, transformative moment where my relationship with what abundance looks like was completely transformed, and it just didn't have to do with anything that existed on the outside of me, but something on the inside of me. And then this began to facilitate what my spiritual practice looked like, and very slowly, I finished the doctorate, I finished the dissertation, I wrote the first book, the publishing deal came eventually, I found myself living with an old friend who was willing to support me financially in exchange for the well-being that he experienced by virtue of having me in his home, taking care of his dogs, and sort of making his house feel a little bit more comforting to him because he had some anxieties about his, he just had some anxious experiences in life. And through that financial support was able to build a life and career that I enjoy today.
And how long ago was this time when you were given $1 by your maybe homeless friend?
Right, about 11 years ago, 12 years. So it was 2003.
And would you consider that time in your life a gift?
Absolutely. Oh, my God. Yes. Beautiful gift. Beautiful gift.
so hard to look at it that way when we're in it, right?
Well, I would say that's a great question. Of course, the answer would typically be, oh, absolutely. But that was not my experience. My experience was I got to see it as a gift while I was in it. And that's what made it so spectacular. This was not a hindsight experience. I was living the experience of the gift that it was. So that initial shock that I went through, and when the show was canceled and I realized there was going to be an uh-oh, was replaced almost immediately by a kind of sense of upliftment and support. Even amongst the depression that I felt, there were these moments of numinous experience. Even the choice to sell everything that I owned came as a kind of a visioning. I heard a voice. I knew that it wasn't a real voice and it didn't happen outside of my mind, but I heard it as a voice. Sell everything. And I responded to it saying, what? What, are you kidding me? Sell everything. Now, if I had gone to a doctor at the time, a Western person, they would have qualified it as a nervous breakdown. You pray and meditate and it becomes a
spiritual awakening.
So which was it? Nervous breakdown or spiritual awakening? I'm not so sure they're very different. I think most spiritual awakenings are nervous breakdowns. And yes, I during this period, I didn't wear shoes. I wore only white. People said, oh, you're wearing white because you think it's spiritually lofty. It was like, no, I was wearing white because my skin felt so sensitive to light that anything that was color made my skin feel like it was burning. This was an absolute physical experience that I was having of a what I would say was a raise in my vibration. And so I responded to that. And, nervous breakdown, absolutely. I'd lost my mind. But I found my soul. I found my heart during that period. And it was the real tragedy was when that vibrational expansion ended and I was just sort of put back into my body like, a regular bozo on the bus, and I had to navigate reaching similar levels of high vibration, but having to do so through a spiritual practice of prayer and meditation. Now that was work.
I agree. It's hard to kind of put your toe back in the water, and it's unsettling, even though you know what you're doing. It's what's it like? It's like learning to ride a bike again.
Absolutely.
Or something.
Or maybe become an Olympic weightlifter when you can barely pick up a can of paint. This is where I think that the spiritual principle of discipline comes in. I spent, for whatever reason that I was gifted, this experience of having a high vibration. Let's just even talk about it from the realm of psychology. That psychology says our conscious ego mind keeps us in check, and this is how we know who we are and how I'm here and you're there and we're separate and that's cool and we get along because I know where I end and you begin, and that's healthy. That broke for me. It broke. My sense of where I end and you begin broke. Because I was spiritually curious and had already put a lot of money in the bank about spiritual consciousness, I was lifted up through that experience of my ego mind breaking off. Eckhart Tolle talks about this in the introduction of Power of Now, where he says he was sitting on a park bench and his ego mind just slipped away and he had an experience of oneness. This is what I experienced in that I woke up one morning with a feeling of oneness that was so utter and so complete that everything I did was just easy and graceful because there was no mind in there telling me that this was all a terrible thing that had happened. That just went away. Now, eventually that mind came back. And so I had to navigate how to have both experiences at the same time. The mind that says that things should be a certain way or you're not safe, and the heart that says we're one with all and all is unfolding beautifully and perfectly. And my experience is that we have to live in the mind because that's how we navigate this three-dimensional world. But we learn through discipline how to quiet that mind, how to let it do just what it's supposed to do, which is really just navigate. The mind is there to tell us turn right, turn left, don't step off the curb, there's a truck coming, put on a sweater, it got cold overnight. And the discipline piece is the prayer and meditation and physical experience of living in a body, anything that one does to sort of navigate life in such a way that it's a muscular discipline of quieting the mind and letting the heart lead. And that's what took so long. So you could tell the story that it just took 10 years for me to develop enough of a clientele and enough of a following so that I could go to another city, do a retreat or a workshop, and have people attend to make a living. Or you could just say that the same story was it took me that much time to really discipline my ego mind to get out of the way enough so that my heart could lead and unfold in a way that was allowing the world to tell me what it wanted from me. Just like my mind said, I don't want to be the dream guy, but my heart was already the dream guy.
Right. You had a great quote earlier. You said to me, something like, we shouldn't worry so much about it. Your life tells you what to do.
Yes. I can't tell you how often I'm sitting with somebody and they're saying, I've got to figure it out, or I'm trying to figure it out, when in fact it's already happening. What you're to do with your life is happening on a daily basis, and you're given the next piece of direction just by virtue of what the life is. I think one of the problems that people have is that they don't like the life they've created for themselves. They don't like the career that they have, and then they take a weekend workshop and they think, oh my God, I'm going to change my life. You know, Los Angeles is filled with people who become yoga teachers.
Well, and luckily lots of people that need to take yoga.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's possible to go to a yoga teacher training and come out the other side and create a life and a career with it, but it's wildly competitive. And here's when it doesn't work. It doesn't work when you want it to rescue you. Here's where it does work. It works when you make a choice and you let it take time to teach you where it has to go. Everybody wants to quit their day job so that they can have the life and the career of their dreams. And that might be somebody's story. But if you just keep moving forward day by day, bit by bit, each day you're presented with the next logical step of what to do. And most people think they've got to plan in advance and know what the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth step is. When it's usually just causing chaos and anxiety to be thinking about such things.
Well, and it's non-linear,
it's
right?
Non-linear, yes.
We don't grow up thinking that, but it's very much non-linear.
And the only thing you really have to hold in your mind on a daily basis is what's the vision? You know, what's the overall intention? What do you want your life to feel like? And you know, if I knew I wanted to eventually be Dr. Michael Lennox and have a doctorate in psychology, that was the overall vision of those 7 years. But if I had been thinking about anything other than the class I was taking at that time, I would have made myself insane. So that's just sort of an analogy of keep the vision intact and then day by day just see what your life tells you or asks of you in terms of what to do to attend to that vision. And if some of it is stuff you would prefer weren't the case, you might have to grapple with changing your perspective of those things. If you hate your day job, but you need your day job to feed yourself, your job isn't to get a new job or a new career. It's to change the perspective of the job that you have through the practice of gratitude. And most people don't get that. They think that the job is to figure out what to do about it. It's like, no. You can't create anything new until you're loving what it is, even if you don't prefer it to be that way, but grateful for it.
Loving what's in front of you.
Loving what's in front of you, appreciating what's in front of you, through the practice of gratitude.
Such rich advice. These things are so easy. Why do we make them so hard?
Well, I would say that they're simple. more than easy. I think they're
Thank you.
they're very hard to do, but they're simple. And this is actually, I think, a point of power. For an example, a lot of the people I work with have habitual mindsets that are aligned with a kind of worry. And they're worried about money, they're worried about this and that and the other thing, and it's a habit of the mind doing this thing, which is telling themselves that everything's awful. And they think that in order for them to have some freedom from this, they've got to figure it all out. I've got to figure out how to have a different experience. But it's really not. It's actually very simple. What to do in the face of an habitual thought pattern of worry is you stop the thought and you replace it with something affirmative. You stop the thought of, oh my God, I'm so scared I'm not going to make my rent on time, and you replace it with a thought of, I know that all my needs are met. I don't believe that, but I know there's a part of me that does believe that, and I turn to that part of me now. Now that's the process of changing the mind's habitual thoughts. And there's nothing else that anybody ever needs. So anybody listening to this, I just gave you the key to having a masterful life. That's it. You stop the thought you're having, you replace it with an affirmative thought. Where people get sort of mixed up with this is they think that there's some sort of complicated magical thing that they have to do to figure out how they change their life or change their thought patterns. But all they have to do is do that thing. But you might have to do it 17,652 times a day for a while before it actually starts to break up the old thought patterns that you're having. Thought patterns are created in the brain by neurotransmitters that have been using the same pathway for decades to have similar thoughts. So if you wanted to build a new road, you'd have to destroy the old road with a jackhammer. Now that old road is made of concrete and reinforced steel, and your jackhammer's tiny. So if I handed you a jackhammer and I told you to dismantle 3 miles of 5 or 6 lane freeway, you wouldn't question that it might take you a while. But you also wouldn't think there's some magical thing I'm going to do with this jackhammer that I haven't figured out. You just take the jackhammer and you would pound into the concrete, little by little by little by little by little. And if you were willing and could stay there, getting little bits of the concrete out of the way, eventually you would dismantle that freeway. That,
I guess you'd stay. You'd stay if you knew that what the riches that were what you wanted were at the end.
yes, and there comes the leap of faith. Most people just simply don't believe that the riches are there. I'm here to tell you that they are. I think that's the value of the experience that I had. It's not like, oh, I'm special and you don't get to have a numinous experience because you had a nervous breakdown at the same time you were praying and meditating. But I did, and it's because I'm here to help other people have this experience, right? And so my experience just informed me of a human truth, that there are riches on the other side of this long, lugubrious process of simply attacking the habitual thought patterns bit by bit by bit. And eventually you can have a miraculous shift of perspective.
I'm finding myself listening to going, oh, I want to be taking notes, and then remembering I could listen to this over and over and over. Just like all of you out there listening, you can listen to Michael Lennox anytime you want. Anytime you're feeling doubts about what he's saying, just listen again.
There you go.
How lucky are we? Thank you so much for all this wisdom.
Hey, absolutely. And this is what I get to do every day of my life now.
And you denied that you might want to do this someday.
Exactly.
Just like the rest of us do.
Or I said, I think I know how it's going to happen. And believe me, it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. I also thought it was going to happen in about 2 years, and it took 10. Oh.
Because you had a little jackhammer.
Yeah, because I had a tiny little jackhammer. Exactly right. Exactly right. But I didn't leave the construction site. And I had a lot of no's, and it turns out all those no's were not nows. You know, after that TV show was canceled, there were a flurry of possibilities that were informing me that this idea of a career of a spiritual teacher could be there. There were retreats and workshops and conferences that I was either invited to participate in or had created myself during that calendar year of 2003, 4, and early 2005. And every single one of them was canceled, mostly due to lack of registration.
And please.
Crazy. No, I was just going to say, it was crazy. The shock and dismay and the disappointment was absolutely complete and utter. Fortunately, and again, this is back to the idea that I was really well guided. I had, during that period of time, I moved into this tiny little guest house behind a home in Hollywood. It was beautiful, but it was tiny, because it's all I could afford. Didn't drive a car. And I kept walking by this church, and I kept looking at this church, and I would get this very big buzzy vibration every time I walked by. And they had very clever little sayings on the marquee out front that I kind of thought were funny and interesting. And I didn't know anything about it, but it was the Church of Religious Science, and I didn't really know what religious science was. And of course, for your listeners, it's science of mind. It's modern new thought. It's not dogma. It's the idea that we change our world by changing our thoughts. It's the same principle that's taught in the book and the movie The Secret. It is the foundation for modern day new thought consciousness. Came into existence with the science of mind in the last century, and
long before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
we might
could have a whole talk about the history of New Thought, and people I think would be a little surprised that New Thought and modern psychology and Jung and the 12-step model we're all listening to the same thinkers from the last century and the one before. What happened for me was I wandered into this place one Sunday morning, and I was captivated by the teaching and the talk, and mostly the 6.5-foot grand piano that they had there. Because I play the piano and I sing, and I hadn't been doing that, and I was craving being connected to my musical expression and didn't have any opportunity to do that. So I went back again to services, and of course that day she was talking about being of service to your community, and she kept saying, Reverend Pam McGregor was saying, don't expect to get something if you're not prepared to give something in exchange. And I was sinking down into my seat because I knew that I was expecting to get something. I wanted to play that piano. But I certainly didn't want to give anything back. So I did go up to them at the back of the sanctuary after the service, and I casually mentioned, I live in the neighborhood. Is there any possibility of me coming here during the week, during the day, to play the piano and sing? And they said, come and see us during the week. And to make a very long story short, 2 weeks later, I was asked to be the musical director of the church. And suddenly I had a job. Suddenly, I had a community. I had a community that was steeped in the spiritual principles of you create your realities with your thoughts. Now, I didn't know anything about science of mind at the time, but I knew as soon as I heard the first talk that I was home. I was like, this is what I've been practicing for the last 20 years. It's just codified into something that made complete sense to me. So I came to the teaching late in my spiritual journey, but it fit right into everything that I thought and believed and had been practicing. As a result of this job in this community, these people saved my life. These people fed me for 2 years when I had no money. Like, I'd have my $5 breakfast at All American Burger, but those people fed me lunch 5 days a week for 2 years and gave me an opportunity to play the piano and sing every Sunday as a matter of being of service to others and put a little bit of money in my pocket in exchange for the work that I was doing. But as a result of this community, I had a place to go when I was in doubt, and I was being met with not people who were agreeing with me about how terrible things were, but people who were confronting me with the opportunity to see the truth that I was well guided and I was creating something of power and vision. And that even though the world seemed to be saying no to me, it was really not yet. And so when those workshops were canceled and when those retreats were, taken off the schedule because nobody was interested. While I was devastated on the one hand, I was being supported to just trust my life unfolding, that the vision I had of becoming a spiritual teacher was greater than any given moment when the world was saying, yeah, this isn't the form. And so I just said, okay, I trust. I will keep writing partly I was benefited from the fact that I had projects to do that were long. I had a dissertation to write and I had a book to write. And so that dissertation eventually led to winning my doctorate, and the book eventually got published and was my first book on dreams and dream interpretation. I just kept turning back to, well, what is my life telling me I need to do? My life is telling me work on the dissertation, write the book. And if the world is not wanting you to go to New York to participate in that spiritual conference, then that's just not the form. It's none of your business.
Lots of great lessons. We haven't talked any about dreams yet.
Well, let's talk about dreams.
Let's, please. So what was in that book?
Well, Dream Sight, which is my first book, it's kind of a dream dictionary, but it's not really a reference tool. It's really a teaching tool. It's designed to teach people to think of universality as a language in and of itself, that the symbols that appear in a dream have meaning based on what it is, what it does, what's its use, what's its essence, what's its qualities. So, like, I'm holding my wallet. My wallet is the thing that holds all of the tools that I need on a daily basis. My money, my business cards, my credit cards, my driver's license. So without those things, I can't navigate successfully through life. And so the wallet then becomes a symbol for my capacity to easily reach for anything I might need. There's a glass over there. It's got some water in it. So it's a containment object that helps me sustain myself. I take in something that I need by virtue of being able to contain it in the glass. So if the dream is about the glass breaks, then it's about some capacity to take in something that sustains me is off kilter, is broken, is not working. If I lose my wallet, it's that I've lost my ability to navigate successfully. And I want people to understand that they can interpret a dream by looking at the things that appear in the dream and looking at what the quality is, what the use is, what the essence is. If a dog shows up in your dream, you think about dog. Well, what are dogs? They're unconditionally loving. They're incredibly enthusiastic. They love you no matter what. I'm fond of saying, lock your boyfriend and your dog into the trunk of your car for 3 days, and who's glad to see you? So the dog represents that capacity to love that never goes away. So if the dream includes dogs, then you say, oh, I'm having a dream of my connection to unconditional love. If the dog is menacing and frightening, then the dream might be that I'm having a fearful experience of love, that I'm not trusting it, or that it's going away, or something. This is how I interpret dreams. My gift isn't that I know things that you don't know. My gift is that I can do this really, 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 really fast. By the time you've told me the dream, I already know what it means by virtue of the language of symbols. It's just a story. The story is told in symbolic language. The symbols have meaning. I tell you the story back to you about what the symbols are saying based on universal meaning. And that's what the first book is designed to do.
And what about people that don't remember their dreams?
Well, everybody can open the window longer. The dream memory thing is that the part of the brain that's having the dream and the part of the brain that we navigate life with are separate. They're different aspects of thought. And the one that wakes up and says, oh, my God, I got to brush my teeth, or I get a cup of coffee before I kill somebody, is the navigating mind that's very loud and very encompassing. And when it's up and awake, it shuts out all of the subtler places where imagination and inspiration and dream memory, they all come from the nether reaches of the consciousness. And the ego mind that sort of says, turn right, turn left, is the loud one. And when we wake up, that's the mind that's waking up. And so the person who can't remember their dreams simply has a very abrupt switch from this edges of the reaches of the unconscious mind where imagination, inspiration, and dream memory come from, and that waking mind snapping into attention. you can train yourself to keep that window open a little bit longer by putting a writing implement or a recording implement to the side of your bed and going to it right away. The trick to this discipline isn't to wait for an inspiring dream to come along before you write something down. The trick is to go to that writing implement and say, I don't remember anything from last night, and then sort of sit still for a moment and see if anything comes. And then the real trick is, as we've talked about several times today, is discipline. Doing it for a month and not stopping that process just because the inspiring dream hasn't come. And some people may never be able to open that window long enough. You know, that's a mystery. I have no idea how that happens or why that happens. But I have heard enough people tell me, I started putting the pad by my bed and started writing things down, and it happened. I opened myself. I've actually had people get mad at me for saying once they did that, they started remembering so many dreams that it overwhelmed them.
And why is dream interpretation so important for us?
I think it raises the stakes of the process of becoming more wise. You know, the dreams help us grow in wisdom. They do not need to be remembered in order for this to happen. This is what they do. You know, in REM sleep, our brain is processing short-term memory from the things that we've seen and done during the day. And this makes us more smart. If I study calculus during the day and I go into the dream state, I'm navigating through everything that I've thought about that day and taking everything that's extraneous and throwing it away and taking the important stuff and turning it into short-term memory. And I wake up the next morning and I'm going to remember more calculus on a Tuesday than I knew on a Monday. That's called we become smarter. At the same time, some mysterious thing is happening. We open up to realms of our soul's consciousness, and we connect into some place in humanity that allows us to navigate through greater places. I would call this the soul's consciousness or the collective unconscious. There's lots of different names for it. Scientists who discover this stuff about memory decide that therefore dreams don't mean anything, which is, to me, is just hubris. It's like just because this is happening doesn't mean that that's not happening. So there's this phenomenal, soulful thing that is happening as well. My belief is that we're also practicing what it's like to be a soul in a body having a human experience so that we wake up the next day wiser as well as smarter. And so what's wisdom then? Wisdom is kind of smarts plus love. We learn how to be more loving as a human being as a result of the dreams that we're having, and this is happening whether we remember them or not. However, by paying some attention to them, I think that we increase the stakes and the odds of what we get out of it. I think we can grow faster by looking at them. This is not to suggest that if you can't remember them that you're not going to grow faster. There might be other ways for you as a conscious human being to focus on to increase the depth and the scope of how much you grow as a soulful human being. But if you have access to your dream life, simply remembering them increases what you can get out of that experience of connecting into the invisible. Writing them down increases it even more. Sharing it with another person increases the stakes even more. Take it to a greater place by ruminating in such a way that might look like interpreting the dream. And the best thing that you could ever do with dream material is to do something creatively expressive. Write a poem, make a drawing, dance around the living room, acting it out. And all I think you're really doing with paying attention to the dreams is you're looking at the part of your soul that's asking for your attention. No different than an 8-year-old at the pool screaming at mommy to watch him jump in. Look, Ma! I'm jumping in! And the mother is very bored by this by the 8th time, but the kid never stops saying, look, Ma, does he?
I'm starting to understand why people open their wallets and their purses and give you all their money. I feel smarter, and I feel like my life is easy to master after talking to you. So I just need to keep talking to you 24 hours a day, and I'll have it all figured out.
That's very sweet, but no, of course what you need to do is what you're already doing, Angie. I trust that you are attending to your own spiritual development, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, which is sharing wisdom with others.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Isn't that your vision?
Yes.
There you go.
Part of it.
Part of it. Yay, amen, that you have a bigger vision than just that. Amen, and that you attend to it. Beautiful.
What's our choice when we step into that direction? What is our choice? I guess we have choice to go the other
well,
way.
I think once you open that Pandora's box, you don't have any choice, because to live with even a little bit of your eyes open and then to not pay attention to the hunger of your unconscious to express itself, I think leads to madness and stomach cancer.
No thanks.
Yeah, no thanks. I agree.
Well, and a life of little joy.
Yes, little joy. And there's so much joy in life, and it's just right there for the taking. It needs nothing. We are so oriented, especially in the United States and in Western culture, to believe that joy is a direct result of things. That I have more joy when I have more things in my life that delight me. But in fact, I think it's the opposite, that the joy is the pre-installed mechanism. It can create things if things are part of your desire set, but it's really the thing you want to be cultivating is, the joy that's right there in the moment.
Is there anything that brings you great joy?
Oh my God, there's so many things. I played kickball in the rain yesterday. I'm a wild, passionate man of exercise. I love moving my body through space in a really intense way. So I exercise on an almost daily basis at a very intense level. Music, laughter, movies, anything from the sky up, just looking up gives me joy. In fact, if you're out there thinking, I don't know how to start my spiritual practice, just go outside and look up. Every day, once. That'll get you going. Because it's almost impossible to look at the sky and not be altered. It's
not be in awe of something.
And you don't even have to know what it is. Just look up and feel that sensation. And then remember what that sensation feels like. It's available every time you smile at somebody and they smile back. Now, I'm an extrovert, and that's, I think, makes it a little bit easier.
You are?
Yes, I am. And I think that makes it easier because I am so stimulated by things that are outside of me. So I have a very easy access to having an altered experience by coming into contact with another person or something of beauty. But we are all moved by objects of great beauty. In fact, I do a talk about gratitude, and one of the ways that I help people understand gratitude, which, by the way, I think is a mystery. I don't really know what it is, but I know it when I feel it, and one of the places I feel it is when I'm beholding something of great beauty. And so I look up at a sky, or I look at a beautiful painting, or I hear a beautiful piece of music, and I'm filled with a sensation. And that sensation feels like movement, like energy is moving faster through me when I look up, or I see a hummingbird at the orange tree that's across the driveway in front of the window in which I'm sitting right now. And that feeling can also be cultivated from the inside out. I can sit down and I can write a list of all the things that I'm grateful for. The first time I was told by somebody to write a list of 10 things that I was grateful for, I remember feeling overwhelmed that it took me about 45 minutes. And now I could write a list of 100 in about, 3-4 minutes if I could write fast enough without my hand cramping up. But you can cultivate that sensation from the inside out, and you've landed when the feeling is the same. So I do a gratitude practice just about every morning. Not every morning, so I don't want people to think that I'm, that crazy disciplined. I would love to be able to say, every morning I do this practice. I'd say 3 out of 4 mornings a week, I go through my home with some lit sage, and I express gratitude in each room of my home for the consciousness of the room. So if it's the kitchen where I start, I'm grateful. I express gratitude for being able to sustain myself and support and nurture myself through the food and the materials that help me, cook and manage eating, and then through the dining area to share it with others, and the desk where I share my gifts and talents with the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That experience gets me directly in touch with that same sensation in my body that happens if I look up at the sky and I'm filled with awe and wonder. But it does take time to get to that level of openness. That didn't happen overnight. That took 10 years of disciplining myself with prayer and meditation to the point where I can get there that quickly. And so that's another thing that I encourage anybody to listen, that is listening to, is that This is a lifelong practice, and we get better and better and better at it the more time we put in. But, don't walk away before the miracle happens.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful advice. Do you say open-ended prayers or a formatted prayer?
It depends. It depends on the way I'm praying. That's a great question. It's definitely open-ended. It's definitely spontaneous. But it's also based on sort of a structure of, expressing gratitude first to sort of open myself up to prayer. There's usually an offering of something I'm releasing, letting go of doubt and fear or lack and limitation consciousness. And then there's always a declaration of what I'm praying for. And it's done in an affirmative way. So it's never a beseeching or, I want this, or give me this. Like, for instance, if it's about motivation to attend to my writing, it wouldn't be, please motivate me or please help me find motivation. It is, I know that I am in the motivation of writing, that the writing and the words flow effortlessly from me, and I'm grateful for this, and so it is. Mm. That's a really important element of affirmative prayer, which is it's never a question, it's always a statement.
Because we already have it.
Because we already have it. It's like one of the first prayers I ever did on a regular basis back 10 years ago when I was in that depression. I knew that prayer was going to change the chemistry of my brain. I don't know that I just knew it. I had studied it in grad school, and I trusted it implicitly, even though the evidence might not have been there right away. And so I did a 2-word prayer for about a year, where every day, constantly, I just said to myself over and over and again, well-being, well-being, well-being. Why? Because in the literature around SSI, antidepressant medication, they said it fosters a feeling of well-being. But I didn't want to take Prozac anymore, so I was like, okay, maybe I can create well-being. And I just simply said, I decided that if I said the words well-being, that my brain would understand I was asking to have more serotonin stay in the synapses.
And it worked.
And it worked.
I know we're running out of time, but I really want to talk about your work around astrology before we close today.
Sure.
And I want to know, when you were in these years of 2003, 2004, what was astrology saying about what was going on in your life?
It was matching every moment absolutely unequivocally with a level of accuracy that to me it was a lifeline. If I hadn't been an astrologer at that time, I think I really would have lost my mind. But every time I felt an acceleration of any sensation, and I looked at the astrology and how the current weather of planetary movement was impacting my chart mathematically, it aligned. It was exact. It was unequivocal and undeniable. And so it allowed me to have a sense of, this is just going to pass. Like, there's a cycle that I'm in. It would be an astrology lesson if I tried to explain exactly what kind of cycles I'm talking about. But just, if you're listening, trust me, that I could see how these wild sort of breaks with reality that I was experiencing were being exemplified or concomitantly expressed by the math of the current planetary placements at that time, interacting with the math of my first breath in 1963. And so I had already been studying astrology and was making a living doing astrological readings by that time. And the thing about using it as a tool was, at the end of the day, what it really gave me was a sense of continuity. One of the things that happens when people lose something of great value to them and they go into crisis as a result is the belief in the moment as it's permanent. It's like grief. You lose somebody that's dear to you, whether it's through a breakup or a death, and the overwhelm isn't so much the feeling, but the belief that the feeling will be with you forever.
That's what it feels like in the moment.
That's what it feels like in the moment. That is absolutely right. It's a real bona fide sensation, but it's not true. It's not true. And astrology gave me a sense of the fluidity and the movement of stuff, so that when the moment was clunky, I could be with the clunkiness because I knew it was going to pass. When the moment was numinous and expansive, while I didn't want it to pass, I could lean into it fully and get out of it what I needed without sort of having some fantasy relationship to it. And so that's one of the things that astrology's. sort of helped give me personally in that moment.
Well, I want to talk about the work that you have going on in your books. Will you come back another time and educate us on astrology?
Absolutely, anytime.
I would love for you to do that. So we'll make a date for that. But please tell us what you're working on and how we can get more of you on a day-to-day basis or however we can do that.
Absolutely. The easiest place to connect with me is my website, michaellennox.com, MichaelLennox.com. I have a monthly newsletter. It's actually bi-monthly. I send out an article with every new moon and full moon, and right there on the home page it says sign up for my newsletter, so you can certainly get onto my mailing list from the website and receive that stuff twice a month. I also have a daily column that I write that's a subscription, and that's called the Daily Astro Alert, and there's information about that also on the home page of my website. It's a subscription series, so I certainly invite people to check that out. I'm also very active on Facebook with all of my postings and articles. So I take all comers on Facebook, just as Michael Lennox, or there's a business page called Perchance to Dream. And that's another place to check in with what I have to offer. And you can find out information about private sessions with me also on the website. But if you take nothing away, just remember the name, Michael Lennox, and then it's michaellennox.com. Easy.
And I wanted to just mention that it's very reasonable to work with you. Your prices are, for all that you've done and experienced, you're approachable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I thank you, and I certainly value myself. And if money is a challenge, I work. You know, what I bring to the table isn't quantifiable. Like a person who brings a gift, you're not paying them for the gift. You're paying them for their time. Right? And so you can work with me for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or 60 minutes. And so if budgetarily, it's not so much in your budget to work for 60 minutes, but you can afford a 30-minute session, we can certainly make that a valuable experience.
And I know several people in my circle of friends that work with you on a regular basis, and they wouldn't miss it.
Yay.
And your next book, or your book that just came out, tell us what that is and where we can get it.
That's also available everywhere books are sold, and this is a straight dream dictionary. It's called Llewellyn's Complete Guide to... Llewellyn's Complete Dictionary of Dreams, and it's got like 1,200 symbols in it that I channeled through interpretations of to be a reference guide. That's the book that you keep by your bed and look up. Although since it came out 2 months ago, all I've been hearing is, oh, you don't have this one in there. You're missing skiing. I'm like, oh, okay, well, for the next round. At any rate, it's available everywhere books are sold. So Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, bookstores. You name it.
Perfect. Yeah, and may I ask you one final question before we close?
Sure thing.
Thank you. So just tell us, what should listeners learn from your life?
Oh, my goodness. There's nothing more important than your spiritual connection. Period. Nothing.
Thank you for that.
You got it.
Thank you for that. Thank you. It's been my great pleasure to spend this time with you today. I'm very honored.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You've been listening to the Life Purpose Advisor podcast with Angie Swartz and Michael Lennox, my guest today, my wonderful guest. If you'd like more information about what Michael does, please visit his website at michaellennox.com. And if you'd like more information about working with me directly on finding your life purpose, you can get more information about that at lifepurposeadvisor.com. We will see you next time.